can't change the load on coal plants. You can on gas. That's what we use right now when the solar can't handle it, the wind can't handle it, and our baseline can't handle it. When that 5 o'clock hour comes and we need more power, that's why you see all the gas plants around the state of Arizona. That's why it was so bad when the federal government came out and said that we could cut Arizona could cut all the coal facilities out of their portfolio because you had enough production. Well, the interesting thing is we had enough production because we had all the gas backups that we use in times when it's the middle of the summer and it's extremely hot. That baseload power is something that you have to think about. We have Nogales. You can't be running on maybe power when you're bringing fruits and vegetables across the border.
Hollis Wyan. Same question.
Okay. Well, I have a few.
Won't forget him. He's on my list.
A few replies to this. Number one, I'm going to say something that's probably going to startle you, but I don't think I have the answers for everything. And I think that's a good thing. I think when you go into the legislature, maybe sometimes all you need is a goal, and you need to figure out how to get there. And that doesn't mean you know before you get there exactly how. But I can tell you that my goal is that we have as much power as possible and into the future entirely at some point 100% renewable energy sources. That's what I would like. I hate the word can't. I don't like it when people say you can't do this and you can't do that. This is America, doggone it. We have some of the best minds in the world. When we put our minds to it, we can put people on the moon in very short order. When we put our minds to it, not only can we figure out this whole renewable energy and figure out how to store it, but you know what? I kind of like the fact that all those other countries may be pulling back. Because they've already explored some of that technology, and we probably can figure out what works and what doesn't work. Let's take advantage of that. Let's put it to work for us. Let's figure this out and do it, because we need to be the world leaders. And let's take advantage of the fact that all these other countries are ducking out. And when we're on the forefront, they're going to have to be buying from us. That's what I want to do. I want to do that right here in America, and we can do it right here in Arizona first, because we have the most sun, we have the availability, we have the access, we have the land, we have all kinds of great resources to make renewable energy a top priority. We can do it. Let's just put our minds to it and do it.
Okay. Now, Brett Roberts.
Thank you. At risk of repeating some of the stuff that's been said, Representative Leach mentioned we just currently don't have the capacity right now to store solar power. Baseload power we're dependent upon baseload power because we don't have any way around it right now. I'm going to share a story that we just heard a couple weeks ago. Representative Gosar talk about. He went to visit Germany, and Germany was, he was touring a facility, a solar facility, and they were kind of bragging that, talking about how they were so, proud of their facility and so on and so forth. And so he asked the question, he said, where do you get your baseload power? And the response was, we're not familiar with that term. So he's like, okay, well, he moved on. And the next day he went and toured the military base that we have there. And so they're going around touring the base and everything, and the subject of power comes up, and he asked, where do you guys get your power? And they said, well, we get it from these two lines, that comes from Russia, which is where Germany gets their baseload power from. So they're buying their power from Germany, who gets their power from Russia. So essentially what I just told you was our military base is reliant upon baseload power from Russia. Does that make sense? That shows you how important baseload power is. That's a no-no. We can't have that. We have to be reliant on our own power. The original question talks about conservation and things like that. I don't have anything against solar. I like solar. I think it's an awesome thing to be able to create energy from sun rays. There is a problem with it though, other than the one I already stated as far as being able to store that power. The other problem is solar panels are not recyclable. They're very hard to get rid of. And when it comes to wind, there's also issues with wind. You see that when you ever go to California, not to knock California, but whenever you go over there and you see all the windmills, those windmills happen to take out a lot of aviary type, waterfowl, birds, that kind of stuff. There's an issue with that. There's also an issue with the hazardous materials that comes from that you have to use to keep those windmills operating. There are ecological issues with that as well. But I did notice that Ms. Lyons' answer changed on this particular issue from the last forum that we had. And you can watch this, it's verifiable. In the last forum on this particular subject, she claimed that sometimes you have to make it painful for the public in order to get things to change. I'm not looking to make things painful for the public. Thank you.
Okay. And just so you understand, I'm no longer going one direction and then the other. It's very, just kind of mix it up. Okay, the next question, Vince Leach will start. And what actions are you willing to take to increase funding for Arizona's public education system?
So, we have put, let's go where we are now. We have put $2.7 billion in funding for K-12 schools. We had since 2015. We passed, with your help, you passed Prop 123 to put money into, and as an aside on Prop 123, it ended a very bitter, very expensive, very long lawsuit that the government and the teacher organizations agreed to, and this was fully agreed to, Prop 123 was fully agreed to by both sides. The economy is growing, and it's growing extremely fast. It's seemingly being strong, as Brett mentioned earlier, with the 300 companies coming in, the 200 people per day that are coming in. I don't have a crystal ball, but we foresee more money coming into the system, into the government, by not raising taxes, only because we have businesses growing and you're building wealth, and it's from that you get increased wealth and increased revenues for the state. That being said, it would be, we still owe, as has been put up, there was about 800 million, 900 million to be exact. There was a rollover during the Great Recession that we need to pay back. I've been a fan of that since day one. We borrowed that money from the school system, and we should be paying that back. We were able to two years ago, because there was a substantially less number for the universities, we paid back 200 million. As that money becomes available in our general fund, and we see that we are structurally balanced and we have more funds than what we're going to need, and we have money to make sure that there is a little bit there in case we don't forecast quite right, then we can put that into education. But I will tell you, there are other people knocking at the door, and we've already heard about more money for infrastructure. I will tell you that DPS and our corrections officers haven't had a raise for 8 years. Do you think they're going to be in the gallery in the House of Representatives this coming year? They want raises. We have not done raises across our people that are working in the state, and we need to look at that. So yes, on more funding for education. I don't know how it's going to work out. I don't know how it's going to flow. District assistance is a great thing. We fully restored that. We do know this. If we send money to school districts and say it is for teacher pay, it doesn't show up there. It does not work.
Ralph Atchu.
So since 2008, when the Great Recession began in Arizona, at that time we had a proposition in place, Proposition 301, that required the state to fund public education to a certain level based on inflation. So we understood a recession hit and some cuts needed to happen. But came of that is the state continued to not fund, and continued to not fund, and continued to not fund. And so there was a lawsuit. That's what Representative Leach referred to, that was supposedly settled by Proposition 123. But before we got to 123, the state legislature and the governor ignored their responsibility to the voters, they ignored their responsibility to the state constitution, and they actually ignored a unanimous decision by the Arizona Supreme Court. They said you can't enforce it, and we're not doing it. So they didn't fund. The resulting lawsuit that was settled with Proposition 123, 70% of that money, only 70% of the money was brought up with Proposition 123. Not 100%, only 70%. The money is taken for the most part from a fund that was already set up to fund public education, the Land Trust Fund. So really the state did nothing. They exacerbated the problem. So what's happened in addition to teachers' pay, and by the way, in this last session, the state legislature and the governor told the teachers, we're going to give you a 1% raise, take it or leave it. 1%, take it or leave it. But when those brave teachers showed up in numbers at the state capitol, 75,000 of them, day after day, Governor Ducey and the state legislature buckled, and all of a sudden they found money. An election year gimmick. That's all it is. There's no way that they know how to continue funding. There's no way they know how to meet that 20% raise that they put on the table for our teachers. But it goes beyond just teachers' pay. Facilities have been cut for maintenance and school buses and things by 90%. That money's not restored to the state. But what has happened since 2008? We've had ever-increasing tax cuts going to corporations and high-end income families. Why didn't that get cut? Education got cut, not just public education K through 12. The universities got cut. The community college system in Arizona was almost completely cut. One college got funding in Pinal County. The program that the state funding for the trade schools, that got cut. We are talking about a systematic cut of education that has not stopped. It's up to the voters now to elect state representatives that will restore that funding.
Okay. Rhett Roberts.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk on this subject. Mr. Atchie brought up something earlier as far as teacher pay. I just want it to be known that the Arizona Tax Research Association has stated that when the 20-for-20 plan is implemented in 2 years, so they just got 10%, they're going to get 5%, they're going to get another 5%. When that is fully implemented, we will have went from number 40 in the nation as far as teacher pay to number 16. That's a huge jump. I think that the legislature has taken a step in the positive direction. And let me just say, I support education. I support all education. I don't support just public education because I'm not going to buy into that narrative that I'm some sort of demon because I don't support just public education. I support charter schools. I support private education. I support higher education. And one portion of education I think all of us agree upon is technical, vocational, like JTED type education, because we do need people that can fix the electricity, the light switches, the air conditioners, and that kind of thing. We need to expand on that. But as far as finding future funds for education, we've taken a huge step in the right direction in the last session. And Mr. Atchie brought up something that they went from 1% and you know, with his story. I just want to point out, in the past 4 years, at the state legislature, when anybody has ever voted for money for education, it has been predominantly the Republican Party that has voted to increase funds to education. In this last session, in the House, not one Democrat voted to increase those funds. Why? Because they said it's not guaranteed. I'm sorry, there's no guarantees in life. Okay? So we've taken the right step. And as a legislator, it needs to be pointed out that we can't just focus on one particular issue. We have a lot of different issues that we have to focus on. As Vince pointed out, corrections officers and DPS officers, which is something near to my heart because I worked in jails, They haven't got raises in 8 years. So this is something that there are many different aspects. When you have an economic downturn, everybody feels it. When we start to recover, those increments get placed as we move along. I agree that education is extremely important for economic development. We need to continue to promote economic growth. As we grow, corporations come in, jobs come in, people move in, we'll have more revenue from taxes. So that's going to be a portion of revenue. Mr. Atchett brought up earlier the federal lands issue, and he keeps saying that we want to sell the lands. The point on this is, if we get the funds that go into Washington, and a very conservative number, we'd be looking at $500 million, that all the funds that come from those lands could go to Washington. And there's another aspect that I can't get to because I'm out of time.
Okay. Hollis line.
So I think the question really was, how would we increase funding for Arizona public education? I think that was the actual question. So there are two primary avenues. One is sort of immediate, and that is any economic growth that we have in the state that produces more revenue, more people, more companies doing well, whatever, that generates more funds and taxing. That should be put into education predominant. And I'm not going to stop and say every dollar ought to go into education, because there are other needs. For instance, the Public Safety Retirement Fund. The Public Safety Retirement Fund was, what do they call it, swept, back when the legislature did not fund schools. It just didn't get as much press. And certainly the public safety people did actually sue the legislature, just like we call them the alphabet soup folks for the education side, sued the legislature. They won in the Arizona Supreme Court. And the only difference was, while the education issue was going on, and it went through the courts and then it just sort of stopped because nobody would take any action. The public safety people all got together and came up with a new retirement system. So that helped a lot, and they went forward from there. But Mr. Leach is correct. They haven't had a pay raise in a long time, and they deserve a pay raise just like teachers do. But let's get this right. It's not, the teachers didn't strike for teacher pay. The teachers struck for 5 different issues. One of them was teachers, because you know what? 25% of the teachers are eligible to retire in the next year. That 25% is our senior corporate knowledge. And when they retire, our system, which is actually way outperforming how it's been funded relative to the rest of the country, is going to really be suffering. How do you backfill a teacher who's been at it for 25 or 30 years? How do you do that? So number one, additional revenue. Number two, there are $13.7 billion in tax loopholes in the state that haven't been reviewed, and nothing's been cut. I shouldn't say they haven't been reviewed. They have been reviewed, but the legislature never did anything with the review. So none of those loopholes have been cut since the 1990s. So we need to put together, and oh, by the way, our entire state budget's about $10 billion. So $13.7 billion in loopholes and giveaways, those are leaks in the bucket. And the bucket only has $10 billion in it. So we have to figure out how to stop some of those leaks, which ones we need to. We need a bipartisan, nonpartisan commission or committee or whatever to look at those, plug some of those holes for the ones that are not giving us a return on investment, and put that back into education.
Okay. Well, we're done with that section of the questions because we're running out of time. But I will admit that you all did a wonderful job giving full answers. Okay, the next questions are about the propositions, and you will answer only by a show of hands. So this will go quicker. Please raise your hands if you support Proposition 125. It's a proposed amendment to the Constitution of Arizona relating to public retirement systems. Unanimous. Please raise your hands if you support Proposition 126 to protect Arizona Taxpayers Act. No, 0. Okay. Well, you've made it easy for me. I haven't had to count. Please raise your hands if you support Proposition 127, Clean Energy for a Healthy Arizona Amendment. Okay. 2 out of 4. And I think you saw their hands, so. All right. Please raise your hands if you support Proposition 305 relating to empowerment scholarship accounts, and this is also known as school vouchers.
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt. We do not have, no, you addressed the question, we do not have vouchers in the state of Arizona.
Okay,
It's
but it's,
prohibited by the state constitution. I'm sorry, we just don't have that. Because that
Okay.
question would be inaccurate.
Yes.
okay, well, I will remove that. So raise your hand if you support Proposition 305 relating to empowerment scholarship accounts. Okay. And the last one is Proposition 306 related to the Citizens Clean Election Act. Okay? Well, we're through with that section very quickly. All right, now you each will have a minute for your closing comments, and we will start at the opposite end with Brett Roberts, and you have a minute, each of you.
Well, thank you again for everybody coming out. I want to use a couple of seconds of my closing to go back to education. There was 2 points that I didn't get to make. Currently, 54% of the $10 billion budget the state has goes to education. So 54%. 47 goes to K-12, 7 goes to higher education. What I'm asking is, in your opinion, what is enough? Because we already have over half of our $10 billion budget going to education. The other aspect that I couldn't get to when it came to coming up with funds for schools, the state of Arizona currently has about 225 school districts. 225. Our neighbors to the northwest, Nevada, have 17. So this idea of consolidation comes up once about every 4 years, and it's a very difficult subject. But in a previous forum, we all agreed this would be something, all of us up here and the others that are not here agreed it would be something to look into. Thank you very much, Brett Roberts. I'm asking for your support.
And Slade.
Thank you, Oro Valley, for being here this afternoon, and Deborah, you did a great job at keeping everybody, you sometimes get a little excitable. We appreciate your input. I'm looking forward to questions afterwards. Let's look at where we are. This economy is booming. We're doing things on the border to protect drugs coming across the border, kids coming to the border, sex trade coming across the border, and we're growing our economy. And all through this, we got through this last year, and we have eliminated 676